Hey there friends, today I'm going to be reviewing Gold Spun by Brandie June. This came in the June Bookish box, and I had a good time reading it, so I'm excited to get the chance to tell you about it. As always, I'm going to start with a general review, but something I think I'm going to change is I'm going to try to put a rating on some of the other kind of sensitive categories, 1 through 5. That way it can be in the middle, but it also can be a little bit more on either side. So just to start off, I want to say kind of generally what this book is about, and it is a reimagining of the Rumplestiltskin fairy tale. Except in here we see the miller's daughter actually get a name and get a lot more personality. When we're introduced to Eleanor, or as her friends call her, Nor, she is moving around the countryside with her brothers. They've had a really rough time of it, and so she has to be a little less than truthful to get enough money to feed their little family. She finds herself in even hotter water than usual, though, whenever the prince catches her scamming. And in an effort to prove to the public that she really was just scamming and this was all just a con, he puts her in the famous situation from Rumplestiltskin where she is locked in a tower with a lot of straw and is expected to turn it into gold overnight. That was a fun take on the tale, and I had a good time reading it. I would give this section a 1 as far as maturity levels go. We only ever had the one narrator, which is Nor, and everything is told in first person past tense, and we're privy to her thoughts. With there not being a lot of narrative changes or new points of view, I think someone of any reading level or maturity would be able to handle this very well. As far as maturity or moral themes go, I would also rate this a 1. I feel like the real morality push here is doing something that might not be what's best for you, but it's what's best for either others that you care about or a larger amount of people. Nor kind of sees this when she's trying to take care of her brothers, especially early in the book when she finds that she has to go to the castle and is going to be locked up and expected to do this impossible task overnight. She goes without fighting because she knows that it will be worse for her brothers if she fights. And so similar things happen throughout the book where she has to put them in front of sometimes what she would want the most. We also see this reflected in Casper. Often he'll be talking about what he needs to do for the good of the kingdom, and it seems like that's most often kowtowing to some nobility or somebody with money so that he can actually have funds and resources to help out his kingdom. So he goes through a similar struggle, just on a larger scale. Since this is a moral issue we all kind of learned pretty early on, I think that this would be fine for any level of reader or level of maturity. So I would actually give this book a 3 in this category, not really because anything too intimate happens. All we ever really see is a few heated kisses, but I rate it a little higher because there are hints of rape. The word is never used, but Nora does sometimes point out to the reader that she's worried that things might be worse because she's a girl. It's one of those things with the way that it's phrased in here. If you know about that, you know what she's talking about. But perhaps if someone younger is reading the book, they might not quite get that. But anytime that kind of topic comes up in a book, I always want to mention it just because that can be very upsetting and something you might not want to willingly expose yourself to or have in material that you're recommending to somebody else. So violence I would also rate pretty low, even though in the back of the book, June does say that she was inspired by the Grimm of the Grimm's fairy tales. I feel like while this book doesn't shy away from it or try to make it like Disney-ified and nearly too clean, I also don't feel like there's an overabundance of violence. There is a little bit of bloodletting. Blood has certain properties, and so she has to use her blood for some stuff. When she runs into Rumplestiltskin, he uses his blood for some stuff. So there is a bit of talk of blood that way. Another potential aspect that could fall into this category of violence might be the loss of loved ones. Both of our kind of main characters have suffered loss, and in a violent way. For Casper, it was his brother. For Nor, it was her father. One was attacked directly, and then another one lost his life in a battle. So both are violent deaths, but not one that we as the reader are present for, but something that is frequently brought up because it's important to both of these characters. So other than those two things, a lot less violence than I'd expect after hearing how much she enjoyed the Grimm part of the Grimm fairy tales. I didn't find anything very troublesome, but it wasn't not there at all, hence the 2. So for just my general opinion of the book, I would probably rate it a 3. It definitely wasn't bad, but I just didn't really fall in love with it either. Some things though that I did appreciate about it though is that I feel like June really heavily featured two big tropes, and she did them really well. She didn't use them as like crutches. She actually made them make sense. And even though it is that trope, it can stand on its own. Even if there was no easily identifiable trope that this would fall into, it would make sense in this book, in this story. And those two tropes are enemies to lovers. When Nora and Casper meet each other, he's trying to prove that she's a fraudster, and she's trying to scam people, so he's not wrong. And so they're at odds and they're fighting. And if you know the story of Rumplestiltskin, you kind of know what happens next. But I don't want to give anything away because not everybody does know that story. But through their shared time together, that fury, that fire, that anger kind of dulls, and they're able to establish a friendship. And then that friendship buds into a romance. But I felt like it was all well reasoned. It made sense why they would initially meet each other with such ferocity, and why they would continue to see each other, and why that would kind of wear down. I feel like sometimes books lean on that crutch and go, we don't have to explain it too much. You just want to see it, right? But June did a good job of making it make sense. The other trope that I think was done pretty well in this book that isn't always is a love triangle. I often don't find myself falling for the romance line or story or whatever in most books. I usually don't care that much. Usually when I care, it's because I like the character and I want them to be happy, but it's kind of been a while since I felt that. I feel like this almost sounds heartless to say, but while I wasn't actively wishing for their happiness in this book, I did appreciate that in a love triangle, it so frequently falls to what I think is just petty bickering, and somebody will get mad at something that seems rather small, and if they just stopped and talked about it, everything would be fine, but they don't because the book needs to happen. And that didn't really seem to happen in this book. Both guys seem to make their case, and she seems kind of appropriately torn between life with either of them and kind of what she wants and how she feels about both of them. And as she kind of starts to make her decision, it seems pretty well reasoned, not very like flippant or you did this small thing and I'm now going with the other guy. But there's also a little bit of secret keeping, as I'm sure there would be if you tried to juggle two people at the same time. So there is a bit of that betrayal moment, but the secret that's kept can be pretty harmful. So I get it. It's not a petty thing that just needs to be talked about. It's a big thing. It's a really hurtful thing, and it could still be talked out. Both parties could still make it work, but it's a lot more hurtful than, what I see in some of these love triangles being the reason to set somebody off against the other. So I like this book enough. I still stick with my 3 though, even though it handled the tropes well. I just didn't fall in love with it. The characters were fine, but weren't near and dear to my heart, and the story never really had me that on edge. Oh my gosh, what's gonna happen next? I can't put down this book. All right, so that was my review of Gold Spun by Brandie June. The Too Long Didn't Read it is a perfectly fine book for what it is. It's a retelling of Rumplestiltskin, and it's pretty interesting. It focuses more on the miller's daughter and less on Rumplestiltskin, although of course he's in there. But if you're a fan of fairy tales, you might enjoy it. If you've been on the fence or you can get a copy pretty easily, I'd say go for it. But if you've got a long list, maybe don't necessarily bump this one up to the top. But those are just my thoughts. So thank you for stopping by today. Your support really means a lot. And I hope that you're having the best of days. And I get to see you in the next video. Bye for now.